Well, the CIA did reveal that they've used programs like that in the past. In the
Mhm.
70s, there was a big program used to train psychics and remote viewers and stuff for assets, to be
Yeah.
assets for our military. I believe that they've been used by other countries as well. Remote viewing it's now it's been broken down into a science that can be taught. You can remote view things. I have an interesting story, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but
Today's guest is Kelly Fisher. She is a psychic and medium located in San Diego, California, also known as SoCal Medium. I am so excited for today's podcast because I feel like I'm like jumping right to it, but I was reading your website and doing a little study up before I did this. And you mentioned that you've been to the Arthur Finley College.
yes.
And I was actually there 3 weeks ago, and I took a trance mediumship course.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah, and you even mentioned Andy Bing, and I wasn't in his class, but he was having another class at the same exact time.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm just so excited that I have a connection to you.
I love that you were at the Arthur Finley College.
Yeah.
So who did you study with for the
I
trance
studied
mediumship?
with Sharon, Harvey, and Angie.
Okay, so Sharon is one of my favorites. She is just your people probably won't know Sharon, but she's just the best. She's just so fun and she's so hilarious.
She is.
And I have stories that probably won't be appropriate for for your podcast, but I'm so glad that you got to study with her. She's very special. And Angie is too, but I've never worked with her directly.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my mom has, but I haven't. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So that's
is your
really
mom
cool.
a medium also?
She is naturally a medium. She's more inclined to do channeling work, which is, I think, why she's worked with Angie in the past.
Yeah.
But she actually, she goes to Sharon for readings pretty often.
Oh.
So, because she can do it, over Zoom.
Yeah.
And even though I'm a medium, it's best for my family members to go elsewhere.
Of course.
Because it's just so close to me. Yeah. But and Andy's wonderful too. He was a mentor for many years, and he became a friend. It's great when you can have that mentorship relationship and also that friendship, because it just sort of creates this very nurturing environment to be able to grow in your mediumship.
Mm-hmm.
So
it was honestly such an amazing experience for me to be in a college with 80 plus mediums who are all there for the same thing.
Exactly.
It was an experience like no other, really.
Yeah, you can't really describe it. You have to go to experience it.
Yeah.
We call it Hogwarts. I'm sure you can.
Yeah,
you can
I felt like I
understand.
was in Hogwarts for sure.
Yeah, the school, the college is just, it's so thick with spirit energy because that's what's been done for so many years, as you know. It's like the land it sits on is almost magic, and I remember there was one day when I was at the college where I was sitting in the room, and I believe it was Sharon that was delivering the lecture. They call it inspirational speaking, as you know. And I remember like looking out the window, and it was my first time at the college, and the grass was just this beautiful like England green, lime green color. And I remember thinking like, did I die? Like, am I dead? Am I in heaven? And I just forgot the part where I passed, because it was really the first time, like you described it. It was the first time I've ever been in a group of people who are like-minded, who are all mediums or spiritual in some way, spiritually gifted in some way, and where I just felt I belonged. Because when you're in the world, it's really, it's positive. It's wonderful. We need to be in the world. It's kind of like the Bodhisattva. Like you learn your lessons, but you have to go out and be in the world. It's harder to do that than to sit alone in a cave and meditate, but you feel a little bit out of place. And I'm sure you can relate to that.
One of the really amazing things being there was the museum.
Yes.
And seeing all the pictures of the ectoplasm and all the physical mediumship, which is just, it's the most fascinating thing. And then I got to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the same people all week. Yeah. And I was sitting there with women who've been in these physical mediumship, maybe demonstrations, where they say like they experience trumpets flying around the room. Yeah. These really profound things. And I just feel so blessed that I get to be around people who believe and know these things.
That there's more. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, the physical mediumship is fascinating. It's obviously, been done for thousands of years.
Yeah.
They say that there are less physical mediums in the world today than there have been in the past. I think that that's true, but I also feel like there's more of a physical mediumship was really used to prove that our loved ones, that they don't die when the physical body ceases to exist on the earth. When your heart stops beating, that life doesn't end there. It was more of like, a vehicle to prove it to everybody else. But I feel like because mediumship has become more mainstream, we have Tyler Henry, we have it on Netflix, like we've got it out there in the public in a way that, produces evidence through mental mediumship that maybe we don't need the physicality of it so much. And physical mediumship, not only does it take a physical medium to produce it, but it also takes a lot of energy of everyone in the room, the medium, the spirit world, so they are capable of it. But if they can do it in an easier way, they will. So I've seen some stuff at the college. Sharon did a physical demonstration, and it was fascinating.
Yeah,
it was amazing. Yeah.
Wait, what was that experience like?
Oh my gosh! So the big room, the one that
library?
sits next to Miss Finley's boudoir. So it's not the library. That was where Gordon Higginson did a ton of his demonstrations. But it used to be the dining hall, actually, before the dining hall was shifted to where it is now. So in any case, to just kind of paint the picture, it's a very expansive room. And there's like a kind of a little bit of a stage there, a little bit of a lifted floor at the end of the room. So Sharon sat in a chair very much like this one. And she had a bowl of water underneath her chair, and she put her vitamins in there because it was, I think she said that it draws on a lot of her energy. So the vitamins help to support her. But anyway, it was, and Simone Key was there as well. I don't know if she was there your week. She was the one that I went to for trance healing. So another trance teacher. But in any case, so Sharon sat there, she went into trance. Simone sat in the front seat as kind of the control to make sure that the energy in the room was safe for her. And it was dark. I remember it being nighttime. And I remember feeling a little bit anxious, like when it got started, because I was like, I don't know, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if this is okay. I grew up in a Christian home and a Christian school. So like the physical mediumship was a big no-no. So I was just like, okay, all those fears kind of come back. But then as soon as she kind of went into it, there was this peace that came over the room, like this just beautiful, thick peace that came through that just felt like it was divine, in the best possible way. And then this is the part I'll never forget. There was like this cloudy mist that started to rise from the floor up, and it just built and built and built. And I was like, am I the only one seeing this? But in physical mediumship, everybody has to see it for it to be real, right? So then I started to notice that everybody else was experiencing the haze as well. And at one point I reached down, and it felt cool. It felt like you were running your hand through a cloud. Like the temperature was different. The consistency was different. I don't know that it was ectoplasm, but it was something akin to that. But it was definitely a manifestation of something from spirit. So, and then, that was just at the start. And then what started to happen was, in physical mediumship, at least in Sharon's demonstration, her face will change. So the spirit world will build kind of a mask around her face of ectoplasm, and then they will imprint their features on top of it. So she actually at one point looked exactly like Robin Williams, and I don't know if it was Robin Williams or just somebody who looked a lot like him, who was somebody's loved one in the room. And then she kind of turned her head, and she looked like a woman of a different ethnicity than her, and then her lips would get big and her chin would go away, or it would get more prominent, or her nose would go. It was fascinating. It was wild. And then when she comes back from it, she really doesn't remember what took place, because she wasn't really present in a conscious way. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
I'm just thinking about how they're actually not allowing physical mediumship at the college right now.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about it, but there's also talk about that changing too. So I don't know.
Did they give a reason for why?
I feel like this is drama that I shouldn't be sharing.
Sure.
But there was actually people who were fraudulently fraudulently doing physical mediumship there, and they got caught. So now they're scared. I think they're scared of lawsuits and stuff.
Yeah.
So they're like, no more of this.
Okay. I think that was a couple of years ago because it was somebody that I knew who was a part of one of those demonstrations and actually was part of like calling that out.
Oh, wow.
So I had heard about that, but I didn't know it was at the college and I didn't know that had that effect.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it's really important anytime you're doing any kind of work spiritually or mediumistically that your ethics are of just the absolute highest caliber.
Of course.
So I, and I do respect that about the college. I think that the college is very legitimate, that they're, all of their tutors and their instructors and their mentors and their teachers are always very well vetted, and their gifts are tested over and over and over again before they're even allowed to teach. Okay, well, I understand that. That's a reasonable reason why.
Yeah,
I wanted to go back to, this is off path a little bit.
That's so fine.
But I wanted to go back to what you were talking about with the museum before we got into the other bits about physical mediumship. I have a story. So everybody who's been to the college has a story about the college seeing spirits or hearing things or whatever.
Yeah.
Or maybe not everybody, but most people. So one night, as you know, the time difference between England and here is vast, and I've got little kids, and at the time I went, my kids were going to school, so I would wait until like, I don't know if it was 1 or 2 in the morning to call them to talk to them after they were out of school. Then I'd go to bed, and so I was taking a shower, and I was sharing a room without a bathroom, so I had to walk way down the hall to go take a shower, and then you carry your toiletries and you've got your little slippers on and all that stuff. So I had to walk past the staircase and also past the museum to get back to my room. And so I'm walking, it's quiet, everybody's asleep. It was like midnight. And I'm walking back to my room, and I go, the museum has 2 doors on either side. So you go out one hallway through a glass door, as you can remember, and then you pass the museum, and then you go back through another door. And that's where I went to go to my bedroom. And as I went through the second glass, and they're heavy doors, they're, considerable in the way that they open and close. Anyway, I went past it. And as I did, I then heard it like it closed, and then I heard it go whoosh like that. And I was like, somebody else behind me? What is going on? So I peek around the corner, and there's nobody there, but the door had clearly opened, and it's a heavy door. It had opened on its own behind me and then closed again. And I was like, there were some Americans staying next to me. So I'm knocking on the door because I couldn't get my key out fast enough. I'm like, let me in. There's something in the hall. So there was clearly something that was just messing with me. I went and asked the ladies downstairs the next day. I was like, do you have any cameras around the museum? And they were like, well, why do you want it? They don't have it. But, and I told him, things were going on, and I swear the door opened and closed behind me, and they go, oh yeah, there's a lot of activity around the museum. But anyway, so I had a little bit of a moment there where I was like, I don't know if I can stay here. Like, I'm okay with the spirit world, but like, I don't know, like this place is just really heavy with spirit energy. Yeah. And then I had a thought that, okay, I'm going to just have a talk with them. I'm going to go and I'm going to say like, okay, if you're going to open the door, open it for me. Like, don't open it behind me. Just open it for me so I can walk through it, and we'll be good. And from that moment on, like, me and whatever energy is there at the college, we're in the flow. We were good with one another. But, Gordon Higginson, who was one of the best mediums to ever live, he taught at the college for a very long time. He mentored one of my mentors, Mavis Patilla, who recently passed back in September. And she used to say that she would go to the college. She started going to the college back before there were like lights, but when it was candle lit. So it was a long time ago. And she said, so you'd walk through the halls and it was just super dark. And she said, and I was afraid. And she said, I told Gordon that I was afraid because I could feel things there. And he would say, Mavis, if there's spirits here, they're your spirits. So there's nothing to be afraid of. So that runs through my head when I go.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine being there with just candlelight.
I can't either. Yeah, it would have been, because, it's an old English Tudor style home, right? Yeah. So it would be really just creepy anyway.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know, I feel like this is just backtracking so much, but on your website, it mentioned how so throughout your entire life, you've always kind of been aware and seeing spirits.
Yeah.
But in 2008, right? Around then is when they started becoming more prominent.
That's right.
And more like, hey, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah. There was sort of this like relentless pursuit of me. It was gentle, of course, because they're never going to force you into anything. But I feel like there was an awakening within my soul that was just ready to connect with the spirit people on the other side. And I think they got the note, and they were just kind of there in mass. So it was really, I felt like there was, everywhere I went, there was some sort of spirit person that was trying to get a message through to their loved one. And they were, really sort of common occurrences, but or common situations that I was in where the spirit people would come to me. So I remember like laying on the beach. I was just, this is pre-kids. I was just kind of doing my own thing. I'm sure I was reading a book or whatever. And I so clearly had this spirit person come to me, this mother in spirit, and she said, "Do you see that lady over there?" And it wasn't anything like scary or not like the door opening at the college. It was just this gentle like, "Hey, I'm here, and do you see that girl over there?" And I remember looking and saying, "Yeah, I see her." And she goes, "It's her birthday. You need to go tell her happy birthday." And I just thought, there's no way I'm going to do that. I'm very naturally introverted anyway, so it's not like me to just walk up to a stranger, but especially then, there was no way I was going to go up and be like, "Hi, I'm Kelly, and your dead mother just told me it's your birthday." Now I would be more open to doing so if I felt like that person was receptive to the message. But yeah, so that would happen. That happened to me on the beach. It happened in an elevator. I remember on an airplane. There were just so many times. And then there was one time where I was getting a massage. I believe I was on a work conference or something with my mom. Like she had a +1, so she brought me and she got like spa treatment. So I went in, and this lady was working on me, and she was very sweet, and I just kept tensing up. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You know what? I'm not sure if I'm okay, because I keep feeling like your grandmother is here in spirit." and she's very persistent, and she's not like letting me relax. And the woman kind of like backed off for a moment, kind of like, totally unexpected.
Right.
But I couldn't have stayed there, and I couldn't have allowed her to finish and like to be like very relaxed, because this lady was in my ear. And I said, "Are you open to hearing from her?" And she said, "Yeah." And so I shared all the details that had been like flooding in for the last 10, 15 minutes of the massage. And she was like, "That's amazing. Like I've never." And so I walked out of that massage kind of with a totally different mindset, because it was really the first time that I can remember getting a message, sharing a message, and it being validated in such a beautiful and deep way, and in such a healing way also for that lady. And I remember getting in the, still at the spa, I got in the hot tub with my mom, and I was like, "You're never going to believe what just happened." But that kind of started me down this journey of like really intentional discovery. I'd always had that ability and that gift, but I didn't know what to call it. I didn't really know what it was. I remember watching Medium when I was growing up. Who was it? What's that name? Arquette? I don't remember her name. Anyway, she's an actress who starred in that series where she would solve murders by getting dreams and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, wow, that's so cool. Like I have a gift, but I don't know what it is. So that set me on that journey of like intentional discovery behind it. I am lucky enough to have an aunt who's a channel. And she had a very normal job. She would consult with Fortune 500 companies. And then she went to Australia, and she came back and told her whole family that she had this like really big spiritual sort of happening when she was in Australia, and now she was going to be a channel. And we all thought she was nuts. I was young, but I remember like the way the family talked about it was like, "Well, I don't know if Jonette's okay. Like what's wrong with her?" But so she did, she said that, and she's done it ever since. She does it to this day. She's got people all over the world that she works with and channels for. And so I remember calling her and saying, "I don't really know what this is, but can you help me? And one of the first things that she did, because I kept referring to it as weird and crazy, and she said, you've got to change your vernacular. It's not crazy. It's not weird. This is natural. This is normal. Wow. And she says, and I think what you're doing is mediumship. I think you're talking to people's loved ones, and it's a little bit different from channeling, but that might be your gift. So she said, look, I've got a really big list. Let me open you up to my list. I'm just going to send it out. If you're willing to do just free readings for people, they're very loving, very kind, and they'll let you practice. And I was like, okay, it was very nerve-wracking. But she sent out something. I had immediately a bunch of people raise their hands, and so I started doing readings for them without knowing. I hadn't had any formal training. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I was just going from what was naturally coming through. And time after time after time, it was like every detail, not every detail, but most details were validated. Yeah. And, but in the early stages, I remember it was mostly over the phone because most of her people are in a different state or other parts of the world. I would sit quietly and focus on that person before I got on the phone with them. And then I would write down the details. And then I remember being like really energetically wiped out after each and every one of them. Yeah. So, and I thought, well, I don't know how this is sustainable. I don't know how I'm going to sit in front of somebody and keep my eyes open and, do it real time. And so that's what got me to start to look for a mentor who could help me develop my mediumship. And I ended up just sort of by chance finding James Van Praagh, who was my first real mentor and teacher. And then it was with him for a couple of years. And then I started with Andy Bing. And then simultaneously with Andy, I was working with Mavis because their teaching styles are very different. And I needed both. And so it's just been a really fun journey and adventure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And in the beginning of your development, how is everything coming through to you?
That's a really good question. So in the very beginning of my development, it was things were coming through to me very visually. So I was using a lot of my clairvoyance, my clairseeing, and it was so tangible. It was right there. It was like I knew it. Like I didn't question it. I just knew it was right there. So I think because I didn't know much, I just was giving everything that I was getting. And Mavis she used to say, what we do with mediums in development is we take them from being a natural medium, we make them an unnatural medium, and then eventually they go back to being a natural medium again. So in other words, when I started in my development, I was very much a natural medium. Everything was just coming through so naturally. And then when they started to teach me how to develop my mediumship, it became sort of very unnatural, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then as I started to implement these different, practices and philosophies and everything into my mediumship and work out my own form of mediumship, then it became more natural again.
Can you give some examples of what it feels like to be more natural and then examples of unnatural?
Yeah. So I could probably speak to it best with the English form of mediumship, which is a lot more evidential than I would say the American form of mediumship, which tends to be more messagey and flowery, if that makes sense. So with the English form of mediumship, they're very strict when they get started with you on, your recipient can only give you yes, no, don't know, in terms of feedback. Yeah. So you're giving one piece of evidence. I have a mother here who's died of breast cancer. You say yes, because maybe that makes sense to you in this example. And then I give another piece and you say yes or no, depending on it. So with just that little bit of feedback, you have to really work with what you're getting. And that feels very unnatural to begin with, because you really have to, I would say when I was more of a natural medium in the beginning parts of my development, everything was coming in very clearly. It was either clairvoyant or it was clairaudient. So I either heard them talking to me directly or I was seeing it, but I wasn't necessarily working with all of my clairs. So I would see something and I would just say what I had, but I wasn't feeling into it. I wasn't using my clairsentience as much. So the unnatural part of mediumship has you really open up the rest of your clairs to look at an image and to, rather than to just say like, I see a train, your grandfather used to drive a train. You start to feel into the train and think like, am I riding on it? Am I at a bar called the Whistle Stop? Am I a conductor on it? Am I so you start to use your clairsentience to really feel into that image. And that is unnatural. That because
okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But it's really an important point of development for a medium to go through, because you will often, through giving contacts and messages, you'll often get an image that doesn't make sense. And you have to really, you have to really dive into it. You really have to feel into it to see, what does this image mean, rather than just saying, I was just given an apple. I remember, back to Mavis, she was just such a magnificent teacher and medium. There's one demonstration that she did, I think up in Canada, and she would always say, I'm not very tech savvy. I really am not. And so her partner would always do it all for her. And so she's doing this demonstration and she says, I've just been given in my hand a piece of fruit. And I think she said it, and it's a blackberry. And so she actually felt she was holding a piece of fruit, of blackberry, in her hand. And she had no idea that this was actually the phone back in the day that was called the BlackBerry. And I think it was like the creator of the BlackBerry was in the audience or something like that. Wow. And so somehow it linked in. I don't remember the full story, but had she just gone with that, what are you going to do with a piece of fruit in your hand? That, so she had to feel into it, and she had to use that to create the story that the spirit person was trying to tell.
Wow, thank you so much.
Sure.
I want to mention, you briefly, as an example, you just said, I have a mother who died of breast cancer.
Yes.
And my mom actually passed away from breast cancer.
Oh my goodness. I'm sorry to hear
that. No, it's okay. I just thought it was really cool that
sometimes
was like the example.
That happens. Yeah. So that happens to me a lot, because you're not it just passes through, like it just comes naturally. But I remember I had this gal, just another example to that. I was doing a phone reading for this girl. I remember kind of giving her my intro, and I said something like, for example, if you're hoping to hear from your brother Nicholas, and she gasped, and I said, are you okay? And she goes, no, that's exactly why I'm here, is because I'm hoping to hear from my brother Nicholas. Aww. And I was like, okay, well, let's just get started, because he's here. So
that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Before your sessions, or even during your sessions, do you set intention to connect with whatever spirit wants to talk to them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. So I would say that I don't intentionally do that every time, because my guides and my heart and my soul are in a space where that just is always my intention, is to touch the highest need of the person who comes to me.
Wow.
And also to heal the highest need of those in the spirit world. Because as you probably know, but some people probably don't, just because they're in spirit or they're in heaven doesn't mean that they don't still have needs, and that they don't still desire to express and feel the need to say, I'm sorry, or I love you, or thank you, or whatever their message is. So I always go into every session or group reading or whatever with that intention that highest need is met. Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel like that could be applied to overall life. In any interaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think that if that's just at the forefront, if that's always your desire, is to, it's always your desire and your intention is to touch that highest need of everybody that you interact with, then you just start to be at that highest vibrational frequency. And we're not perfect, right? We're human. So there are times where our frequency, even if you hold it really high, can be taken down. You can get angry. You can get frustrated. Like, we're still human, but I tend to find that I can go back to a high vibration a lot more easily now because I remember what it feels like. So you can get, I feel like I can get taken down, but I go back up really easily.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, maybe it would have taken me longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
I have a question for you.
Oh yeah. What is it?
So when your mom passed, is that what kind of got you started in, into your interest into spirituality and mediumship?
It kind of took a while. So my mom passed away when I was 12.
Okay, so it's been a while.
Yeah, and I kind of just was really depressed.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. Like when I was around my family, I felt like I was really depressed, but when I was around my friends, like I felt a little more alive.
Happy. Yeah.
But then there were always these weird moments where I got really silent, quiet, and awkward.
Yeah.
And it was maybe when I was 21 in college where I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I feel terrible and I will literally do anything. And I was always drawn more to the spiritual aspects of life.
Okay.
So when I was around 21, I started seeing someone and it was about an hour of therapy and then 30 minutes of energy healing.
Wow.
And I never really, like in that time, I didn't really understand energy healing. I was kind of just like, okay, this is fine. This feels good. I always fall asleep on the table and I feel really good when I leave.
Yeah, good.
Eventually, I just got more and more curious. And it's always like during work, I got really stressed out.
Yeah.
So like, it's like when I'm at my worst, I'm like, okay, like what's out there? I want to learn. Like I want to grow. I want to feel better. I've always been curious about psychics and mediums.
Okay.
And I did see a few growing up. And it was kind of like always in the back of my mind, like, oh, they're really cool. They're really fascinating.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know more. And then there came a point in time when I got more into spirituality, like, oh, I could probably be a medium and develop my abilities. And I have access to this stuff too.
Yeah, you do.
So now I'm just following this curiosity. And the more and more that I follow it, the more I realize that I am just so fascinated by mediumship. And I was thinking about this last night of how there's like I could talk about mediumship forever.
Yes.
I could talk to everyone about it. I could just ask so many questions. And even being at the Arthur Findlay College and studying trance mediumship when I didn't really know much about trance. But when I got there, I was like, wow, this feels right. Like this is all about speaking and using my voice.
Yeah.
And allowing the power within to speak through me, and then also having the opportunity for other spirits to speak through me.
Yeah.
And this is perfect because of my podcast, because I'm really getting into speaking.
I love that. That's amazing. That's so cool. And I love how you say it, like following your curiosity.
Yeah.
Because that really is the soul tugging at you to say like, here we go. And you're just following that. You're following your soul and you're following that call, and just it's leading you into amazing places. So, but I also can relate to what you're talking about just that fascination with mediumship and the spirit world and all of that, and that you could talk about it forever. Because I remember when I was sort of searching for my purpose and like what I need to be doing, with my life. And I remember thinking like, what do I love? Like, what could I talk about for hours on end without ever tiring of it? And it was always that. It was always mediumship, spirit world, all things God related. Like that is what lights me up. So when you have to have that, like that fire within and that passion to really follow it like for a long time, I get back to Gordon Higginson. He used to say, many are called, few are chosen. And I used to sort of like not fully understand what he said by that. What does he mean by chosen? And what I think he really meant is that many, many people have this faculty of mediumship within them that they can develop, that they can grow and understand and use. But few people are able to really stay with it for the long term. And I think that's what he meant by few are chosen. You've got to have a thick skin. You've got to be able to like ride the waves of emotion, because you really are, if you do it in any kind of professional capacity, or even if it's not professional, but you're doing it for other people consistently, you're sitting with people in some of their most vulnerable times in their life and some of the heaviest pain that they've ever journeyed through. And you hear and see, because a lot of it is clairvoyant, you hear and see a lot. So it's not for the faint of heart, I found. And there are times where it will affect me energetically and emotionally to where I'm like, okay, now I've got to do some of my own like self-care and self-healing, because carrying and you're not supposed to carry other people's grief in this kind of work. You're supposed to hold the space and be the container, and then that's their pain, but you help them through it. But as an empath and as a human, like, you can't help but take some of it with you. So there are times where it gets really, really heavy, and some people have a hard time like kind of riding those waves and coming out on the other end of it. But I think if you know about that going into it, that and your heart is really just on fire for it, you get through it.
I feel like I have like things I want to say, but I'm like, no, don't say that one. So then it like blocks me. Well, what I was gonna say is that when I was coming in here, I was grabbing my stuff, and like I've just been bouncing around doing. I was just traveling for 3 weeks in London and Amsterdam, and I was grabbing my stuff out of my car. I'm like, geez, like you really gotta like be passionate to like want to start your own side project, right? Because I'm a full-time accountant as well.
Yeah, I figured you had a full-time thing that you were doing.
When I started this podcast, I was so scared.
Yeah,
because I don't really talk much about spirituality with a lot of the people in my life.
Right.
And so I was like, what are they going to think of me? And blah, blah, blah. And there was so much fear. And I just got to the point where I'm like, I have to just go through this fear. Like, I have to do the thing that I'm so passionate about. And it's funny, too, because I don't think people even really watch or listen or care unless they're actually interested.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, there is a coming out of the closet process with it that can be very difficult depending on where you come from, who you associate with. That was absolutely the case for me too. So I can 100% understand that. And I've got friends who are gay who say, I came out of the closet twice. I came out of the closet as a gay person, and now I came out of the closet as a medium. And I can tell you that coming out as a medium was harder. And that may not be true for everybody, but it's a common sentiment that I've heard a couple of times. So yeah, it's tough. And it's I think that it's misunderstood still in many, many ways. The amazing miracle that happens every time that a loved one comes through to give messages and evidence that life survives death is so incredible. And it's in many like belief systems, it's still held as this like no, this taboo, this this thing that's evil, and it's so the opposite. And I am hopeful that the view of it will change, because it is inspired healing. It touches and it heals in ways that sometimes formal therapy or traditional therapy can't reach. It can reach so many different parts, but there's often this sort of this piece that can't be healed unless it's touched by that loved one that comes through. And and I think that I believe Great Spirit, God, that she has created this universe, right? And created us in this way that does not cut us off from the love. That love is, love binds, love is eternal. And there are so many belief systems out there that say that like when a life ends, no matter how much you love that person, that's it. You're not supposed to talk to them anymore. It's done and it's over with, and maybe you'll see him again someday when you go to the other side. But that's just, I know that that that's not true, but that's just never been my reality. It's always been, this, they live on, and not only do they live on, but they're very interested in us and they're around us all the time. And there's just nothing evil or dark or heavy about it. It all comes from what I call God's white light. It's all under that umbrella that allows that healing and that relationship and that communication to be ongoing.
Yeah. One of the most common questions people ask me when I talk about mediumship is about the dark entities and energies. And it's really interesting because I actually think it's so much more valuable to practice mediumship and to work with people and work with these energies, because we now are more familiar with what is actually the light energy and what is the dark energy, because everyone is going throughout this world and they actually don't know what they're interacting with, and they don't know what energies are guiding them.
Yeah, they don't have discernment. And that's something that I think we're all born with different levels of discernment, but through mediumship you develop a very, very high degree of discernment, hopefully, if you're doing it right. And darkness is really the absence of light. So you don't, unless you're in touch with the light in a really meaningful, positive, and beautiful way, you can't be aware of what is dark. Like you said, they're sort of woefully unaware of what's affecting them. So you're absolutely right. We do live in a world of duality. So we live in a world where there's low vibrational energy and high vibrational energy, where there's dark and where there's light, where there's evil and where there's good. But in building that discernment, you start to realize like what you don't want to be a part of, which for me is anything that's dark, that's low, that's evil, that's, that. And we talk about, I talk about energy a lot because we're all energy. Everything in this world is energy. Spirit is energy. And like attracts like. So if you're operating out of kindness and out of a heart-centered space and in a high vibrational space, then there really isn't an opportunity for you to interact too much with darkness. And if you do, you can recognize it very quickly. But discernment is, it's a gift, but it's something that can be a skill and can be developed. And as mediums, we work a lot on that. We work very, very diligently. And there are some people that will do, will work with the darker forces as light workers. So they'll work to remove them. And I don't do that. That's just not in my wheelhouse. But I can notice when there's something there that's not meant to be there, and it's not anything that I interact with. It's okay, you can leave now. But and I think that in working with your spirit guides and your angels, and even some of your loved ones that tend to be helpers for each person, we each have our spirit teams. They also become accustomed to setting the space and holding a high vibration. And so I sometimes have people come and sit down and they're like, I'm really afraid that something negative could come in, and it's like not with me. I don't know, not in this space. That is just absolutely not even a possibility. It won't happen.
And I think the biggest thing to realize is that we have that control, that power to say, no, I don't want to interact with anything negative. But we were taught that we don't have that much power. Well,
it's, I talked about growing up in Christianity, and in many ways I still align. And in other ways, like my understanding of what's taught in the Bible is a little bit different than how some other people interpret it. But it's very fear-based, and it's the devil will get you and all of this stuff. And I believe like in a lot of ways that's probably true if you operate at a low vibrational frequency, if you make a lot of negative choices, if you're constantly, manipulative and harmful to other people, then like if you call it the devil or evil or darkness or whatever, it will get you. Like that's true. But if you stay in that divine light and you stay as aligned with that vibrational frequency, with like what I again often term God's white light, then you're not going to fall victim to that. And you are powerful. You are so powerful to say no. But growing up, I had some scary experiences, and I was taught to say, I'm bound by the blood of Jesus Christ and I command you to go. And I would say that 3 times. If anything like creepy crawly came into my space, I would say it and it would work. It would go. So I learned my power early on, that my power is, it's not only mine, right? It comes from that great spirit. Like it comes from the greater consciousness, but I also can own it, And so I think that's important. As a mom, I teach that to my children. Like, you do not have to be the victim. You don't have to have scary dreams or have scary things come into your space. You can say no. You can set your boundaries. You can spread your light, and create this bubble around you of protection so that nothing can get to you.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's important. I think a lot of kids, go through that.
Yeah, I used to have terrible nightmares when I was younger.
Yeah, and that's tough. And it's also hard because a lot of parents don't know how to
they
help.
had no idea what to do.
Right, exactly. And that was probably part of your abilities and your visions and mediumship and stuff opening up, but maybe not.
No. I still feel like I have a belief that I'm blocked off.
Yeah.
Because it was so bad. Like, it was like every single night.
Oh, and that's terrible.
It got to the point though where I started being able to lucid dream and just be like, no, like, this is not how it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
like,
so you claimed your power.
Yeah.
I love that. I think that there might be something to also again, growing up, there was always this talk about like the battle between good and bad. Like there were angels fighting this war of good and evil, and it was always going on in the unseen world. And so how I conceptualized it growing up was that, I have these gifts and I'm going to use them for good. One of the things that I used to there's a Bible verse in Isaiah that says, "Here I am, Lord, send me." And I used to say that all the time when I was little. I used to pray it like fervently, like, wherever you need me, I'll go. When you're young, so you have nothing to lose. I was like, I'll go to Africa, like I'll go wherever, but I want to be of service. Like, that's why I'm here. Yeah. And I didn't think you would call me to mediumship, but I feel like I have been called here. But I remember thinking, oh, they know how powerful I am. They know how much good I'm going to do for the kingdom of God. So they're trying to pull me down. They're trying to scare me. And I think that there might, like in my sort of childhood mind, it may have been a little bit skewed, but there might be some truth to that, and it might be that they saw your gifts, like they saw you were a light worker and they thought, we're going to scare the poo out of her and then she's never going to want to do the work. And she'll be blocked. And so I think it's like you move through that fear of coming out and doing this podcast. You move through that fear in that way too. And you just say, look, here I am. I'm going to shine bright. Come and try to get me if you dare. But but they won't win. So, but yeah, a lot of people are blocked because of what they went through when they were younger. So, and it might have been their own fear. It might have been fear instilled in them from other people, from doctrine or whatever.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I was watching another interview with you, and you mentioned that you had clients who had loved ones who were deceased, but in murder cases. And I'm wondering if you've ever wanted to work as a psychic detective.
Oh, of course. Yes, I love that. I do have a real fascination with understanding the human mind as it comes to like what would cause somebody to harm somebody else, because it's so outside of my paradigm. I know that we all have like our shadow self and everything, but like I can't kill a bug. So like I don't understand. So for me, I'm very fascinated with like what would cause somebody to want to do that. So the psyche is interesting, but yes, I do. I have witnessed a lot of murder scenes through my clairvoyance. Some of them have been really, really hard to look at, and they're all hard to look at, but some of them involving children and other things are really, really gruesome and awful. But I have had a lot of success. I wouldn't say a lot, but on the cases that I have worked on, we have found success in coming up with really important and pertinent details that could be helpful to the case. So I have somebody who's a client of mine who was a detective in homicide for 30 years and is now retired, but has a couple of cold cases that's come in a couple of times. And I've looked at the cold cases with him because they're unresolved in his mind. They still have like loose ends and questions that need to be answered. And even though he can't revisit the case files any longer since he's retired or really work on them in any kind of meaningful capacity for his sort of peace of mind, it's been interesting to go back and look at like the scenario around what happened with those people and to try to bring him some closure to it. We worked on missing person / definitely suspected that this woman was killed because she hasn't resurfaced for many, many years. But there was a group that I was working with of mediums and psychics. I actually brought a group together and I thought, let's all tune in to this person and to this case and I'll compile all of the details that come out of every reading and find the common threads, because I think the commonalities, the common threads, the themes that come up are going to be the most important. And when I did that, I put together, a kind of a list of common threads. I was actually contacted by somebody in the small town where she went missing, who was working closely with the detective on the case. They needed some extra help, so she reached out to me through my aunt. And so we sent in the tips and the messages and all of that. Never heard anything back. A couple years after, there was a big podcast that went out that focused on that case. And as it turns out, the nickname of the suspected killer was the nickname that came up in our readings that I sent in to the police. And it was Catfish, which is just like so random, right? Seemingly random. But in one of the emails that I sent them, I said, he likely goes by a nickname and could be Catfish. And so it was just fascinating because that detail wasn't, it wasn't publicly known at the time at all.
So they actually caught him eventually?
So they were never able to nail him on anything because unfortunately he took the house down to the studs, ripped out all the carpet.
Wow.
So he got rid of all of the evidence.
Yeah.
But if they had gone in at the time that we sent in that tip, he would have likely been,
That is amazing.
Bars. Yeah. It's
My
pretty
mind is
fascinating.
kind of blown right now.
I know. It's crazy. So I actually have, I had a client come in and I did a reading like I do with most people. And then at the end, I usually ask, are there any questions? Is there anything that I haven't touched on or haven't naturally become aware of? And she said something about, wanting me to tune into this one person, and I think she gave me the first name, and I came up with details around it that were really specific. And then she later emailed me and she was like, "Thank you for a great reading. And by the way, do you want to help solve a murder?"
Oh my gosh!
Like, yes, I do.
Wow.
So she's starting like a documentary on this case, on this unsolved case, and I'm going to see if I can partner up with her to kind of provide that insight. Yeah.
That's so
cool. I know.
Wow.
I know. So maybe we can bring some closure and some peace to this family. Yeah. So it's definitely something I'm open to.
Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
That's such a great service.
Absolutely.
Oh
yeah. I'm always happy to. Anytime there's a missing person or questions around something like that, I donate my time for it. Yeah.
This is a really random, it's not that random to what we're talking about, but I met this guy. I was staying at a hostel in Hillcrest, and so there's a bunch of people who come in and out, and this one guy came in, and me and my friend were watching TV on the couch, and he starts talking. I don't know, I think we were watching probably Gaia.
Yeah.
What's his name? Ed, ET's with Ed or something.
Okay, that's one I haven't watched.
Travels around the world and interviews channelers.
Oh, how cool.
And so this guy at the hostel starts talking to us, and he starts saying how he was in the military for years and how he was actually a psychic in the military.
Wow.
And that it's like really undercover, like no one knows about it. And he was going into detail about the stuff and how like he was the psychic, but he needed other women to be the batteries to like help him get the information and knowledge, and that he was doing remote viewing for like people that they wanted to, I think, assassinate, or I don't really know exactly what they were doing. It was one of those things that I kind of always have in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how true it is because he was just some random guy who came in.
Right.
But he was saying a lot of information, and it was all stuff that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, the CIA did reveal that they've used programs like that in the past. In the 70s, there was a big program used to train psychics and remote viewers and stuff for assets, to be assets for our military. I believe that they've been used by other countries as well. Remote viewing it's been broken down into a science that can be taught. So you can remote view things. I have an interesting story, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but back to my aunt, and if she watches this, she'll probably correct me on some of the details, but I'll do the best I can. She used to be in kind of like this development circle with a few other ladies that were similarly gifted, maybe not channels, but could, see and stuff. And they got together, and at one point they decided to view, I think it was like Area 52? Is that what it's called? It's called Area,
maybe
whatever.
51.
Area 51, Area whatever. But so they decided to view this like very high security site, remote view it. And it was just the four of them alone in their house, and they tuned in and they viewed it. And she said she saw a ton of different details and information about it and so on and so forth. And then the way that I remember her telling it was that the next day or a couple of days later, again, this was like a private circle inside the house. Each of them were visited by what they described as men in black, and at their doorstep. And they said, you don't...
Physically?
Yeah, physically. They came to the house and they said, don't ever do that again. It's not for remote viewing. It's not for any kind of public viewing. And they were all kind of shaken by it. But what's interesting is, like, in working with some other psychics that I've developed with and stuff, I had one tell me that she was, there was a time a couple of years ago where she felt like she needed to give some of the troubled world leaders some healing, like Putin and Trump and all of that stuff. And so she was trying to give them healing. And she said, and she popped in to like a room where she felt like Putin was sitting. And she said, and in that moment, there were like 12 people in a circle around him who all turned around and noticed her.
Whoa.
And she said, and I just felt so uncomfortable. And she's a good psychic. I believe her. It sounds crazy, but I believe her. And she said, I never realized that he's so psychically protected. But so these leaders and sites and stuff like that, the governments know, they know that this is real. Yeah. They know it's powerful. So they have their own, their own defense systems to protect against it. Yeah. So it's that. So I believe it. I don't know if that guy was crazy or if he was legit, but I do know that it's been used in the military. There's that movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. Have you ever watched that?
I've never seen it. So,
but it is around that sort of concept. And there's a documentary out there as well. I don't remember what it's called, but it talks about the psychic unit that the CIA used that supposedly isn't in operation anymore. I don't know if I believe that or not.
It's so interesting how there's like little sprinkles of this information, but it's like not fully known.
It's hard unless you're in the space. It's hard to believe that it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that we have a way as humans to look at things that are hard to believe are true and just kind of shut them out. Like we just sort of like, well, that's that. I'm going to file that in the not true category and then go on with my life in the 3D.
But I also feel like they're like they don't want us to know that it's true too.
Yeah, they may have had to just sort of, maybe the cover was blown enough where they had to like come clean with it. But the way that I watched it and that I think it was presented was, yeah, we did have it back in the 70s, but it was a program that was shut down.
Okay.
So, I mean, which I think would be, I guess would be a shame because I think that it's effective. Mm-hmm. I think that it's an interesting and unique way to fight, but but I think it can work. We had a group for a while going, a group that was compiled by a friend and colleague of mine. I think there were 7 of us, 7 psychics, and we were forecasting stocks. So we would, and then the group they were sort of like testing us out, essentially, like, does this work? And what they were doing is based on what we thought was going to happen with the earnings report, they would invest one way or another. Mm-hmm. So, and we were very accurate. Like the majority, they would always go on the majority, and the majority was hitting almost every single time.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I want to hire you.
It was interesting. What I found was, because I was like, well, how am I going to do this? Because I don't, I don't know a whole lot about the stock market. I'm not that knowledgeable about it. So what I would do is I would go into the boardroom and with the CFO or whoever it was that got the earnings report and presented it privately to the group. And I would feel into his emotion at the time that he was revealing it. Was he elated because they out-earned? Was he disappointed because they fell short? And that was how I was getting it. But then I was testing it out in a couple of different ways. But that was kind of the one that, kind of the golden ticket that was getting me there.
But wouldn't that change depending on what you told him?
No, so they already knew. So the earnings reports were already known by the companies, but they're private until they do the public announcement.
Okay. I get it.
Technically, it would be insider trading if looking psychically into that was illegal,
Yeah.
So anyway, but I wasn't trading any of my own stuff. We were just kind of advising.
Yeah. But being psychic isn't real, so it can't be illegal.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I guess that works to our advantage.
Yeah, in that way. I like that.
Yeah, it was fascinating. It's If more people learned how to do it and believed in it and trusted in it, it would really change our world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know when that'll happen. It's been thousands of years and it's always been this sort of like subsect of the, you know. So anyway.
And I feel like there's so many people since I've been on this, like I really started my spiritual journey about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's always so many people who are like, this is the new age. Like this is like the big time when it's all happening.
Yeah.
But like it kind of gets to the point where like, okay, like, is it
or like how, have they been saying that for thousands of years?
Right, yeah.
Or I don't know. I definitely feel like, I don't know a whole lot about astrology and all of that, but I know that we've moved into the age of Aquarius, or we're moving into the age of Aquarius, and that's something they've been talking about for 20, 30 years, and how that's going to change vibrationally. And I can't, there's no tangible evidence for it, but I definitely have been feeling a shift in the last couple of months. The energy just feels less dense, and it feels like the spirit world is in a way more accessible, that the collective is easier to tap into and tune into. And I felt like, okay, well, maybe that was me, but I checked in with a couple of my friends who are also in this space, and they also have felt a shift. So maybe that's what they're kind of talking about, is like, it's coming. And I do think that now we have a lot more light workers in the world than maybe in times past, and they're discovering every day, more and more of their power, and they're discovering like the power to awaken other people and encourage them to shine their light. So that collective vibration, rising and getting higher and higher is going to help. And then those who are sort of in their slumber and they're in a lower vibrational space, they may or may not come along for the ride. But what I've noticed is you can't wake someone up who doesn't want to wake up.
Yeah.
You just have to let them go through their process.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. And last night, again, like as I was thinking about my podcast and where it's going and how maybe I want to just focus really on mediumship and just interviewing mediums, and how it feels like in a lot of other stuff that I listen to and watch, like people are kind of skeptical. Like they interview people and like the skepticism. But how, like, in my content and my stuff, like, I'm not a skeptic. Right. So, like, I'm not going to be sitting here questioning you. It's like, this is a podcast for believers. Yeah. And I feel, like, very more confident now that, like, I just want to hang out with believers. Like, I don't care about the skeptics or the people who want to sleep or be where they are. Like, you guys, like, everyone has freedom to be where they are and do what they want to do. And I'll just let them do that, and I'll step into my power.
And, you never know if a skeptic will stumble across your podcast or be sent it by a friend or something like that. And they might look at it the first time and think this person's crazy. Those mediums are frauds, whatever they think. Because, again, they have that freedom to think that. But it might just plant the seed, or it might just kind of nudge open that door that allows their heart to start being more open, to start questioning, to start to be more aware. Because I've seen that happen. I've seen people who are fully skeptic can become fully believers because they have no choice, because whatever's been presented to them is so evidential, and it's so, there's just no way that I or another medium or whatever could have known it unless their loved one in spirit was coming through and communicating that directly to them. And so sometimes I love skeptics, because I think when they sit down and they say, well, I don't believe, but do what you do and we'll see. And I just feel in those moments, not every time, but I would say 80-90% of the time, I can feel the spirit world sort of say, okay, we really got to hit this one out of the park.
Yeah.
Like, because that may be the only time that their loved ones have an opportunity to try to connect with them through a medium. And I think that kind of leads me into, you haven't asked this question, but I'm just going to go down this path because I'm passionate about this piece of it, that mediums really need to be as developed as they can be. We're always constantly developing as mediums. I think any medium that says, well, I've arrived is probably has some learning to do still. But because there's such a responsibility that you hold when you're a medium, if you're not fully developed, or you're in a place where maybe like there's something going on in your own life, or something that you haven't processed through yourself, so there hasn't been enough self-development or whatever. I'm not talking about you in particular, but just for other people who go out and quickly hang their shingles. You really do serve the spirit world, and you hold such a high degree of responsibility in your hands, and the ethics of that have to be just like top notch, because that may be the only opportunity that mother has to talk to her son, or that sister has to talk to her brother, or that child has to talk to their mom or their dad. And if you're not picking up on it, if you're not getting it right for them, that's it. That's it for them. So I sometimes have a hard time with mediums who just go out and they start working, but they really haven't taken that time to fully develop, because they're going to blow it. They're going to blow it for the spirit world. And I know their heart might be in the right place, but it's a road. Like it's hard. It's tough. You got to work, you've got to learn, you got to fall down flat on your face. I know there's times I've blown it for the spirit world too. So I'm definitely not perfect, but we also want to be there so quickly, and it's not a quick process. So it takes time. Yeah, that's my soapbox for for a hot minute.
Yeah.
So I also feel that way about like drive-by readings. And you went to the college, so you probably heard this too. But Teresa Caputo, I think, is a great medium. I think she's a fantastic psychic. She's really strong as a psychic. But the way Hollywood does it has her just walking into places and giving readings. And that actually is a fairly irresponsible. It's for the show, so I don't think she actually does that. But it's a pretty irresponsible way, because people need to be in the right place to receive those messages, and not everybody is always ready to hear, especially in a public setting from their loved ones. So, there are times where, like in that massage, where I just felt like this is a private space. She's so insistent. I'm going to do it in a very gentle way. But for anybody who's gifted, who feels like they're getting messages, who feels like they just have to deliver it because it came from spirit, there is a time and a place for it. And sometimes it might be at a bar or in a restaurant or something like that, but it's rare that that's the right place and time for it.
If I spend 20 minutes tonight intentionally trying to develop my mediumship gifts, what would you recommend I do?
Oh, it's such a good question, because I have the right answer for it. So sit in the power. You probably know what that is, but I'll tell you so that your listeners know. It was sort of a journey of discovery to find out what that meant in my own practice. And that was what led me to Andy Bing, because I didn't fully understand it with James. And I think it wasn't James's fault that I didn't understand it. I wasn't grasping it. So I was sort of on this journey, like, what does it mean to sit in the power? How do I do it? And actually a friend and fellow medium of mine who was he's a practicing monk, Buddhist monk, he found Andy and then shared the information. He's like, this guy describes it the best way possible. But sitting in the power is simply the practice of sitting in the space of your own soul. The simplest way to describe how to do it on your own, because it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't take any props or any, you don't need candles and crystals. It's just you in a quiet space by yourself. You just sit, so you get comfortable like you would any other kind of meditation. And, a lot of people will say, a lot of mediums will, teachers and stuff will say to, get your feet flat on the floor and put your back up against, something that's supportive. But I really think if you want to sit cross-legged or however it is for you, just don't lay down. And then you just close your eyes, start to breathe. For me, the breath helps me to kind of release whatever's going on in my mind and my day, slow the mind. You just start to locate a spark of light within your being. And I always kind of find it at the seat of my soul, right there in the solar plexus. And I envision it like the little flicker of the top of a candle. But other people have a problem with fire imagery, so that's okay. Maybe it's just a spark of light, whatever you're most comfortable with. And then you just sit with that light and you let it start to spread and to fill your physical body from head to toe until you become just this beautiful container of light. And that light is you. That light is your soul. That light is your most authentic point of being. And for some people, it might be 2 minutes that they spend in this space, or it could be an hour, but just sitting with the light of your soul filling up your physical body is a beautiful place to be. Ideally, what you want to get to is allowing that light to sort of permeate through your body into the container that you're sitting in. So the room that you're sitting in, maybe you're in a closet or you're in your car, wherever you are, filling up that entire physical space with your soul's light. So you just sort of watch through your mind's eye. You watch as the light spreads to every corner of the room and then fills up. And I like to, I play with it. Like, you don't have to be really serious. You can let your imagination be a bit open. So I like it to be sort of this glistening golden light, but whatever color light works for you is perfect. That's just fine. And then you fill up that entire container that you're sitting in, and you just sit in the space of your soul in your own light. And ideally, you're there for 30 minutes to an hour every single day. Now, that is not necessarily something that everybody can do in their busy day-to-day Western lives. So just doing it a couple times a week and building up in time is perfect. But it's that practice of sitting with yourself. You're not looking for communicators. You're not looking for guides. You're not looking for angels. You're just sitting with you. And the reason that's so important in mediumistic and psychic development and self-development is because you're building that discernment that we talked about. You're getting to know yourself. You're learning to feel yourself as a soul, as your energy, how you feel. And that is brilliant, because then when your mom comes through to me, I know that's not me, that's her mom, because I know what I feel like. And then you start to really be able to understand the difference between where you end and somebody else begins. And that's really important too. In psychic work, the word psychic is rooted in Greek. It means the soul. So when I'm working psychically, I'm expanding my soul light, I'm expanding my auric field, and I am blending with your auric field. So if I haven't built up that discernment, how do I know what's you and what's me? It's so important. And every at least every English medium, but also there are American mediums that teach that will say sitting in the power is absolutely the foundation and the cornerstone to really strong development in mediumistic and spiritual gifts. So it's not exciting at first, and it takes dedication and it takes work, but that gets back to not hanging your shingle right away. Like, learn how to sit with yourself. Learn how to sit in the power of your soul so that you can build the discernment to be able to understand when other people's loved ones are here, or if an angel has come, or if somebody's spirit guide is there. And when you're talking with the ascended masters like God or Jesus, when you're tuned into those frequencies as well. And that, that power of that love, how is that different from moms or dads or angels or guides? So, yeah.
That felt really good to me of when you said how you're just sitting with yourself.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, it seems like it's always this, I want to call it an angel or a spirit guide, because I think I have this belief that they have more knowledge than just being with myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and and that was one of the things that I remember Mavis saying is in her early days, she gave everything to spirit. She was even, she felt like they needed to decide what she was going to wear that day.
Yeah.
And then she said there was a point at which she had to really understand and surrender to this idea that they're not in control, that she's in control, and that she needs to make those decisions. And once she took kind of that power back, it increased her ability to as a medium. So the other part about sitting in the power is that there is a lot of self-development that goes on, because as you sit, things start to kind of shake to the surface. That thing that name somebody called you when you were in 3rd grade on the playground that, hurt your feelings and made you cry and you thought was never going to affect you again, might rise to the surface, and you might have to look at it. You might have to process through it. It could be something that was, really deep and really hard to go through. That was, more significant, maybe the grief of losing your mom at 12, or, people's parents getting divorced or whatever. But that stuff, that trauma, as we know, it sits in our space. And so the more you sit with yourself, the more it's allowed to come up, so that we can look at it and we can process through it. And the reason why self-development is so important to being a good medium, to being a clear channel, is because the weaknesses in our own life, so the challenges that we've had with relationships or the traumas that we've been through, can become blocks or challenges within our own mediumship. For example, let's say you hadn't processed fully through your mom's loss, and then you were working as a medium and bringing through somebody else's mom who's passed of cancer. What it could do is it could trigger that pain within you that then rises up in you and keeps you from being able to really fully bring through her mom, because you're dealing with your own grief. So this is an example. It's not about you, but that's why it's so, so, so important that that we look at that stuff, that we process that stuff. And I see a lot of people that come through my office who I think, wow, they're really gifted. They could be an amazing medium. But then I'm also aware that they're not going to sit and do that work. They're not willing to open up and do the self-development. So they're only going to be able to go so far,
Yeah.
And it's a constant process, right? Because we're always living. So we're always going through things and we're always processing through them, and relationships and dynamics are always changing. So it has to be that commitment to yourself and to spirit to continue to be able to serve in the best way possible.
So as we wrap this up, where can people find you?
Best way to find me is through my website, SoCalMedium.com. They can go to my calendar, and if something calls to them, if their spirit tugs and they need a session, they can book with me there. Sometimes I do book out like 2 months in advance, oftentimes. So if they're not seeing availability, they can always email, and we'll put them on a waiting list, and I will get to them at some point in time. I'm doing more events now. I know we were doing a lot of events, and then COVID hit, and now it's just been slow to kind of get back started with events. But I've got a bunch of events coming up where people can come to a group and they can experience mediumship in that capacity. So that'll be on my events page.
If there was one message that you could say to every single person in this world, what would you say?
I would say you're never alone. That would be my message. We are always supported. We're always loved. We're always held. We're always guided. And this world can create the illusion that we're by ourselves, that we're alone, and that there's nobody there to help us, but we are never alone. Absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this. This is great.
Of course.
And you're such a beautiful soul and beautiful light, and I'm glad that you've stepped into your power and you're doing this now.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.